Street Fighter 2010. Whatever happened to Street Fighter 7, Street Fighter 8, Street Fighter 9, Street Fighter 10, Street Fighter 11, Street Fighter 12, Street Fighter 13, Street Fighter 14, Street Fighter 15, Street Fighter 16, Street Fighter 17, Street Fighter 18, Street Fighter 19, Street Fighter 20, Street Fighter 21, Street Fighter 22, Street Fighter 23, Street Fighter 24, Street Fighter 25, Street Fighter 26, Street Fighter 27, Street Fighter 28, Street Fighter 29, Street Fighter 30, Street Fighter 31, Street Fighter 32, Street Fighter 33, Street Fighter 34, Street Fighter 35, Street Fighter 36, Street Fighter 37, Street Fighter 38, Street Fighter 39, Street Fighter 40, Street Fighter 41, Street Fighter 42, Street Fighter 43, Street Fighter 44, Street Fighter 45, Street Fighter 46, Street Fighter 47, Street Fighter 48, Street Fighter 49, Street Fighter 50, Street Fighter 51, Street Fighter 52, Street Fighter 53, Street Fighter 54, Street Fighter 55, Street Fighter 56, Street Fighter 57, Street Fighter 58, Street Fighter 59, Street Fighter 60, Street Fighter 61, Street Fighter 62, Street Fighter 63, Street Fighter 64, Street Fighter 65, Street Fighter 66, Street Fighter 67, Street Fighter 68, Street Fighter 69, Street Fighter 70, Street Fighter 71, Street Fighter 72, Street Fighter 73, Street Fighter 74, Street Fighter 75, Street Fighter 76, Street Fighter 77, Street Fighter 78, Street Fighter 79, Street Fighter 80, Street Fighter 81, Street Fighter 82, Street Fighter 83, Street Fighter 84, Street Fighter 85, Street Fighter 86, Street Fighter 87, Street Fighter 88, Street Fighter 89, Street Fighter 90, Street Fighter 91, Street Fighter 92, Street Fighter 93, Street Fighter 94, Street Fighter 95, Street Fighter 96, Street Fighter 97, Street Fighter 98, Street Fighter 99, Street Fighter 100, Street Fighter 101, Street Fighter 102, Street Fighter 103, Street Fighter 104, Street Fighter 105, Street Fighter 106, Street Fighter 107, Street Fighter 108, Street Fighter 109, Street Fighter 110, Street Fighter 111, Street Fighter 112, Street Fighter 113, Street Fighter 114, Street Fighter 115, Street Fighter 116, Street Fighter 117, Street Fighter 118, Street Fighter 119, Street Fighter 120, Street Fighter 121, Street Fighter 122, Street Fighter 123, Street Fighter 124, Street Fighter 125, Street Fighter 126, Street Fighter 127, Street Fighter 128, Street Fighter 129, Street Fighter 130, Street Fighter 131, Street Fighter 132, Street Fighter 133, Street Fighter 134, Street Fighter 135, Street Fighter 136, Street Fighter 137, Street Fighter 138, Street Fighter 139, Street Fighter 140, Street Fighter 141, Street Fighter 142, Street Fighter 143, Street Fighter 144, Street Fighter 145, Street Fighter 146, Street Fighter 147, Street Fighter 148, Street Fighter 149, Street Fighter 150, Street Fighter 151, Street Fighter 152, Street Fighter 153, Street Fighter 154, Street Fighter 155, Street Fighter 156, Street Fighter 157, Street Fighter 158, Street Fighter 159, Street Fighter 160, Street Fighter 161, Street Fighter 162, Street Fighter 163, Street Fighter 164, Street Fighter 165, Street Fighter 166, Street Fighter 167, Street Fighter 168, Street Fighter 169, Street Fighter 170, Street Fighter 171, Street Fighter 172, Street Fighter 173, Street Fighter 174, Street Fighter 175, Street Fighter 176, Street Fighter 177, Street Fighter 178, Street Fighter 179. Street Fighter 180, Street Fighter 181, Street Fighter 182, Street Fighter 183, Street Fighter 184, Street Fighter 185, Street Fighter 186, Street Fighter 187, Street Fighter 188, Street Fighter 189, Street Fighter 190, Street Fighter 191, Street Fighter 192, Street Fighter 193, Street Fighter 194, Street Fighter 195, Street Fighter 196, Street Fighter 197, Street Fighter 198, Street Fighter 199, Street Fighter 200, Street Fighter 201, Street Fighter 202, Street Fighter 203, Street Fighter 204, Street Fighter 205, Street Fighter 206, Street Fighter 207, Street Fighter 208, Street Fighter 209, Street Fighter 210, Street Fighter 211, Street Fighter 212, Street Fighter 213, Street Fighter 214, Street Fighter 215, Street Fighter 217, Street Fighter 218, Street Fighter 219, Street Fighter 220, Street Fighter 221, Street Fighter 222, Street Fighter 223, Street Fighter 224, Street Fighter 225, Street Fighter 226, Street Fighter 227, Street Fighter 228, Street Fighter 229, Street Fighter 230, Street Fighter 231, Street Fighter 232, Street Fighter 233, Street Fighter 234, Street Fighter 235, Street Fighter 236, Street Fighter 237, Street Fighter 238, Street Fighter 239, Street Fighter 240, Street Fighter 241, Street Fighter 242, Street Fighter 243, Street Fighter 244, Street Fighter 245, Street Fighter 246, Street Fighter 247, Street Fighter 248, Street Fighter 249, Street Fighter 250, Street Fighter 251, Street Fighter 252, Street Fighter 256. Wait, no. Street Fighter 253, Street Fighter 254, Street Fighter 255, Street Fighter 256, Street Fighter 257, Street Fighter 258, Street Fighter 259, Street Fighter 260, Street Fighter 261, Street Fighter 262, Street Fighter 263, Street Fighter 264, Street Fighter 265, Street Fighter 266, Street Fighter 267, Street Fighter 268, Street Fighter 269, Street Fighter 270, Street Fighter 271, Street Fighter 272, Street Fighter 273, Street Fighter 274, Street Fighter 275, Street Fighter 276, Street Fighter 277, Street Fighter 278, Street Fighter 279, Street Fighter 280, Street Fighter 281, Street Fighter 282, Street Fighter 283, Street Fighter 284, Street Fighter 285, Street Fighter 286, Street Fighter 287, Street Fighter 288, Street Fighter 289, Street Fighter 290, Street Fighter 291, Street Fighter 292, Street Fighter 293, Street Fighter 294, Street Fighter 295, Street Fighter 296, Street Fighter 297, Street Fighter 298, Street Fighter 299, Street Fighter 300, Street Fighter 301, Street Fighter 302, Street Fighter 303, Street Fighter 304, Street Fighter 305, Street Fighter 306, Street Fighter 307, Street Fighter 308, Street Fighter 309, Street Fighter 310, Street Fighter 311, Street Fighter 312, Street Fighter 313, Street Fighter 314, Street Fighter 315, Street Fighter 316, Street Fighter 317, Street Fighter 318, Street Fighter 319, Street Fighter 320, Street Fighter 321, Street Fighter 322, Street Fighter 323, Street Fighter 324, Street Fighter 325, Street Fighter 326, Street Fighter 327, Street Fighter 328, Street Fighter 329, Street Fighter 340, 330, Street Fighter 331, Street Fighter 332, Street Fighter 333, Street Fighter 334, Street Fighter 335, Street Fighter 336, Street Fighter 337, Street Fighter 338, Street Fighter 339, Street Fighter 340, Street Fighter 341, Street Fighter 342, Street Fighter 343, Street Fighter 344, Street Fighter 345, Street Fighter 346, Street Fighter 347, Street Fighter 348, Street Fighter 349, Street Fighter 350, Street Fighter 351, Street Fighter 352, Street Fighter 353, Street Fighter 354, Street Fighter 355, Street Fighter 356, Street Fighter 357, Street Fighter 358, Street Fighter 359, Street Fighter 360, Street Fighter 361, Street Fighter 362, Street Fighter 363, Street Fighter 364, Street Fighter 365, Street Fighter 366, Street Fighter 367, Street Fighter 368, Street Fighter 369, Street Fighter 370, Street Fighter 371, Street Fighter 372, Street Fighter 373, Street Fighter 374, Street Fighter 375, Street Fighter 376, Street Fighter 377, Street Fighter 378, Street Fighter 379, Street Fighter 380, Street Fighter 381, Street Fighter 382, Street Fighter 383, Street Fighter 384, Street Fighter 385, Street Fighter 386, Street Fighter 387, Street Fighter 388, Street Fighter 389, Street Fighter 390, Street Fighter 391, Street Fighter 392, Street Fighter 393, Street Fighter 394, Street Fighter 395, Street Fighter 396, Street Fighter 397, Street Fighter 398, Street Fighter 399, Street Fighter 400, Street Fighter 401, Street Fighter 402, Street Fighter 403, Street Fighter 404, Street Fighter 405, Street Fighter 406, Street Fighter 407, Street Fighter 408, Street Fighter 409, Street Fighter 410, Street Fighter 411, Street Fighter 412, Street Fighter 413, Street Fighter 415, Street Fighter 416, Street Fighter 417, Street Fighter 418, Street Fighter 419, Street Fighter 420, Street Fighter 421, Street Fighter 422, Street Fighter 423, Street Fighter 424, Street Fighter 425, Street Fighter 426, Street Fighter 427, Street Fighter 428, Street Fighter 429, Street Fighter 430, Street Fighter 431, Street Fighter 432, Street Fighter 433, Street Fighter 444, 434, Street Fighter 435, Street Fighter 436, Street Fighter 437, Street Fighter 438, Street Fighter 439, Street Fighter 440, Street Fighter 441, Street Fighter 442, Street Fighter 443, Street Fighter 444, Street Fighter 445, Street Fighter 446, Street Fighter 447, Street Fighter 448, Street Fighter 449, Street Fighter 450, Street Fighter 451, Street Fighter 452, Street Fighter 453, Street Fighter 454, Street Fighter 455, Street Fighter 456, Street Fighter 457, Street Fighter 458, Street Fighter 459, Street Fighter 460, Street Fighter 461, Street Fighter 462, Street Fighter 463, Street Fighter 464, Street Fighter 465, Street Fighter 466, Street Fighter 467, Street Fighter 468, Street Fighter 469, Street Fighter 470, Street Fighter 471, Street Fighter 472, Street Fighter 473, Street Fighter 474, Street Fighter 475, Street Fighter 476, Street Fighter 477, Street Fighter 478, Street Fighter 479, Street Fighter 480, Street Fighter 481, Street Fighter 482, Street Fighter 483, Street Fighter 484, Street Fighter 485, Street Fighter 486, Street Fighter 487, Street Fighter 488, Street Fighter 489, Street Fighter 490, Street Fighter 491, Street Fighter 492, Street Fighter 493, Street Fighter 494, Street Fighter 495, Street Fighter 496, Street Fighter 497, Street Fighter 499, Street Fighter 500. Street Fighter 501, Street Fighter 502, Street Fighter 503, Street Fighter 504, Street Fighter 505, Street Fighter 506, Street Fighter 507, Street Fighter 508, Street Fighter 509, Street Fighter 510, Street Fighter 511, Street Fighter 512, Street Fighter 513, Street Fighter 514, Street Fighter 515, Street Fighter 516, Street Fighter 517, Street Fighter 518, Street Fighter 519, Street Fighter 520, Street Fighter 521, Street Fighter 522, Street Fighter 523, Street Fighter 524, Street Fighter 525, Street Fighter 526, Street Fighter 527, Street Fighter 528, Street Fighter 529, Street Fighter 530, Street Fighter 531, Street Fighter 532, Street Fighter 533, Street Fighter 534, Street Fighter 535, Street Fighter 536, Street Fighter 537, Street Fighter 538, Street Fighter 539, Street Fighter 540, Street Fighter 541, Street Fighter 542, Street Fighter 543, Street Fighter 544, Street Fighter 545, Street Fighter 546, Street Fighter 547, Street Fighter 548, Street Fighter 549, Street Fighter 550, Street Fighter 551, Street Fighter 552, Street Fighter 553, Street Fighter 554, Street Fighter 555, Street Fighter 556, Street Fighter 557, Street Fighter 558, Street Fighter 559, Street Fighter 560, Street Fighter 561, Street Fighter 562, Street Fighter 563, Street Fighter 564, Street Fighter 565, Street Fighter 566, Street Fighter 567, Street Fighter 568, Street Fighter 569, Street Fighter 570, Street Fighter 571, Street Fighter 572, Street Fighter 573, Street Fighter 574, Street Fighter 575, Street Fighter 576, Street Fighter 577, Street Fighter 578, Street Fighter 579, Street Fighter 5780, Street Fighter 580, Street Fighter 581, Street Fighter 582, Street Fighter 583, Street Fighter 584, Street Fighter 585, Street Fighter 586, Street Fighter 587, Street Fighter 588, Street Fighter 589, Street Fighter 590, Street Fighter 591, Street Fighter 592, Street Fighter 593, Street Fighter 594, Street Fighter 595, Street Fighter 596, Street Fighter 597, Street Fighter 598, Street Fighter 599, Street Fighter 600, Street Fighter 601, Street Fighter 602, Street Fighter 603, Street Fighter 604, Street Fighter 605, Street Fighter 606, Street Fighter 607, Street Fighter 608, Street Fighter 609, Street Fighter 610, Street Fighter 611, Street Fighter 612, Street Fighter 613, Street Fighter 614, Street Fighter 615, Street Fighter 616, Street Fighter 617, Street Fighter 618, Street Fighter 619, Street Fighter 620, Street Fighter 621, Street Fighter 622, Street Fighter 623, Street Fighter 624, Street Fighter 625, Street Fighter 626, Street Fighter 627, Street Fighter 628, Street Fighter 629, Street Fighter 630, Street Fighter 631, Street Fighter 632, Street Fighter 633, Street Fighter 634, Street Fighter 635, 635, Street Fighter 636, Street Fighter 637, Street Fighter 638, Street Fighter 639, Street Fighter 640, Street Fighter 641, Street Fighter 642, Street Fighter 643, Street Fighter 644, Street Fighter 645, Street Fighter 646, Street Fighter 647, Street Fighter 648, Street Fighter 649, Street Fighter 650, Street Fighter 651, Street Fighter 652, Street Fighter 653, Street Fighter 654, Street Fighter 655, Street Fighter 657, Street Fighter 660, 656, Street Fighter 657, Street Fighter 658, Street Fighter 659, Street Fighter 670, Street Fighter 671, Street Fighter 672, Street Fighter 673, Street Fighter 674, Street Fighter 675, Street Fighter 676, Street Fighter 677, Street Fighter 678, Street Fighter 679, Street Fighter 680, Street Fighter 681, Street Fighter 682, Street Fighter 683, Street Fighter 684, Street Fighter 685, Street Fighter 686, Street Fighter 687, Street Fighter 688, Street Fighter 689, Street Fighter 690, Street Fighter 691, Street Fighter 692, Street Fighter 693, Street Fighter 694, Street Fighter 695, Street Fighter 696, Street Fighter 697, Street Fighter 698, Street Fighter 699, Street Fighter 700, Street Fighter 701, Street Fighter 702, Street Fighter 703, Street Fighter 704, Street Fighter 705, Street Fighter 706, Street Fighter 707, Street Fighter 708, Street Fighter 709, Street Fighter 710, Street Fighter 711, Street Fighter 712, Street Fighter 713, Street Fighter 714, Street Fighter 750, Street Fighter 716, Street Fighter 717, Street Fighter 718, Street Fighter 719, Street Fighter 720, Street Fighter 721, Street Fighter 722, Street Fighter 723, Street Fighter 724, Street Fighter 725, Street Fighter 726, Street Fighter 728, Street Fighter 729, Street Fighter 730, Street Fighter 731, Street Fighter 732, Street Fighter 733, Street Fighter 734, Street Fighter 735, Street Fighter 736, Street Fighter 737, Street Fighter 738, Street Fighter 739, Street Fighter 740, Street Fighter 741, Street Fighter 742, Street Fighter 743, Street Fighter 744, Street Fighter 745, Street Fighter 746, Street Fighter 747, Street Fighter 748, Street Fighter 749, Street Fighter 750, Street Fighter 751, Street Fighter 752, Street Fighter 753, Street Fighter 754, Street Fighter 755, Street Fighter 756, Street Fighter 757, Street Fighter 758, Street Fighter 759, Street Fighter 760, Street Fighter 761, Street Fighter 762, Street Fighter 763, Street Fighter 764, Street Fighter 765, Street Fighter 766, Street Fighter 767, Street Fighter 768, Street Fighter 769, Street Fighter 770, Street Fighter 771, Street Fighter 772, Street Fighter 773, Street Fighter 774, Street Fighter 775, Street Fighter 776, Street Fighter 777, Street Fighter 778, Street Fighter 779, Street Fighter 780, Street Fighter 781, Street Fighter 782, Street Fighter 783, Street Fighter 784, Street Fighter 785, Street Fighter 786, Street Fighter 787, Street Fighter 788, Street Fighter 789, Street Fighter 790, Street Fighter 791, Street Fighter 792, Street Fighter 793, Street Fighter 794, Street Fighter 795, Street Fighter 796, Street Fighter 797, Street Fighter 798, Street Fighter 799, Street Fighter 800. Street Fighter 801, Street Fighter 802, Street Fighter 803, Street Fighter 804, Street Fighter 805, Street Fighter 806, Street Fighter 807, Street Fighter 808, Street Fighter 809, Street Fighter 810, Street Fighter 811, Street Fighter 812, Street Fighter 813, Street Fighter 814, Street Fighter 815, Street Fighter 816, Street Fighter 817, Street Fighter 819, Street Fighter 820, Street Fighter 821, Street Fighter 822, Street Fighter 823, Street Fighter 824, Street Fighter 825, Street Fighter 826, Street Fighter 827, Street Fighter 828, Street Fighter 829, Street Fighter 830, Street Fighter 831, Street Fighter 832, Street Fighter 833, Street Fighter 834, Street Fighter 835, Street Fighter 836, Street Fighter 837, Street Fighter 838, Street Fighter 839, Street Fighter 840, Street Fighter 841, Street Fighter 842, Street Fighter 843, Street Fighter 844, Street Fighter 845, Street Fighter 846, Street Fighter 847, Street Fighter 848, Street Fighter 849, Street Fighter 850, Street Fighter 851, Street Fighter 852, Street Fighter 853, Street Fighter 854, Street Fighter 855, Street Fighter 866, 56, Street Fighter 857, Street Fighter 858, Street Fighter 859, Street Fighter 860, Street Fighter 861, Street Fighter 862, Street Fighter 863, Street Fighter 864, Street Fighter 865, Street Fighter 867, 866, Street Fighter 867, Street Fighter 868, Street Fighter 869, Street Fighter 870, Street Fighter 871, Street Fighter 872, Street Fighter 873, Street Fighter 874, Street Fighter 875, Street Fighter 876, Street Fighter 877, Street Fighter 878, Street Fighter 879, Street Fighter 880, Street Fighter 881, Street Fighter 882, Street Fighter 883, Street Fighter 884, Street Fighter 885, Street Fighter 886, Street Fighter 887, Street Fighter 888, Street Fighter 889, Street Fighter 890, Street Fighter 891, Street Fighter 892, Street Fighter 893, Street Fighter 894, Street Fighter 895, Street Fighter 896, Street Fighter 897, Street Fighter 898, Street Fighter 899, Street Fighter 900, Street Fighter 901, Street Fighter 902, Street Fighter 903, Street Fighter 904, Street Fighter 905, Street Fighter 906, Street Fighter 907, Street Fighter 908, Street Fighter 909, Street Fighter 910, Street Fighter 911, Street Fighter 912, Street Fighter 913, Street Fighter 914, Street Fighter 915, Street Fighter 916, Street Fighter 917, Street Fighter 918, Street Fighter 919, Street Fighter 920, Street Fighter 921, Street Fighter 922, Street Fighter 923, Street Fighter 924, Street Fighter 925, Street Fighter 926, Street Fighter 927, Street Fighter 928, Street Fighter 929, Street Fighter 930, Street Fighter 931, Street Fighter 932, Street Fighter 933, Street Fighter 934, Street Fighter 935, Street Fighter 936, Street Fighter 937, Street Fighter 938, Street Fighter 940, Street Fighter 941, Street Fighter 942, Street Fighter 943, Street Fighter 944, Street Fighter 945, Street Fighter 946, Street Fighter 947, Street Fighter 948, Street Fighter 949, Street Fighter 950, Street Fighter 951, Street Fighter 952, Street Fighter 953, Street Fighter 954, Street Fighter 955, Street Fighter 956, Street Fighter 957, Street Fighter 958, Street Fighter 959, Street Fighter 960, Street Fighter 961, Street Fighter 962, Street Fighter 963, Street Fighter 964, Street Fighter 965, Street Fighter 967, Street Fighter 968, Street Fighter 969, Street Fighter 970, Street Fighter 971, Street Fighter 972, Street Fighter 973, Street Fighter 974, Street Fighter 975, Street Fighter 976, Street Fighter 977, Street Fighter 978, Street Fighter 979, Street Fighter 980, Street Fighter 981, Street Fighter 982, Street Fighter 983, Street Fighter 984, Street Fighter 985, Street Fighter 986, Street Fighter 987, Street Fighter 988, Street Fighter 989, Street Fighter 990, Street Fighter 991, Street Fighter 992, Street Fighter 993, Street Fighter 994, Street Fighter 995, Street Fighter 996, Street Fighter 997, Street Fighter 998, Street Fighter 999, Street Fighter 1000, Street Fighter 1001, Street Fighter 1002, Street Fighter 1003, Street Fighter 1004, Street Fighter 1005, Street Fighter 1006, Street Fighter 1007, Street Fighter 1009, Street Fighter 1010, Street Fighter 1011, Street Fighter 1012, Street Fighter 1013, Street Fighter 1014, Street Fighter 1015, Street Fighter 1016, Street Fighter 1016, Street Fighter 1017. Street Fighter 1018, Street Fighter 1019, Street Fighter 1020, Street Fighter 1021, Street Fighter 1022, Street Fighter 1023, Street Fighter 1024, Street Fighter 1025, Street Fighter 1026, Street Fighter 1027, Street Fighter 1028, Street Fighter 1029, Street Fighter 1030, Street Fighter 1031, Street Fighter 1032, Street Fighter 1033, Street Fighter 1034, Street Fighter 1035, Street Fighter 1036, Street Fighter 1037, Street Fighter 1038, Street Fighter 1039, Street Fighter 1040, Street Fighter 1041, Street Fighter 1042, Street Fighter 1043, Street Fighter 1044, Street Fighter 1045, Street Fighter 1046, Street Fighter 1047, Street Fighter 1048, Street Fighter 1049, Street Fighter 1050, Street Fighter 1051, Street Fighter 1052, Street Fighter 1053, Street Fighter 1054, Street Fighter 1055, Street Fighter 1056, Street Fighter 1057, Street Fighter 1058, Street Fighter 1059, Street Fighter 1060, Street Fighter 1061, Street Fighter 1062, Street Fighter 1063, Street Fighter 1064, Street Fighter 1065, Street Fighter 1066, Street Fighter 1067, Street Fighter 1068, Street Fighter 1069, Street Fighter 1070, Street Fighter 1071, Street Fighter 1072, Street Fighter 1073, Street Fighter 1074, Street Fighter 1075, Street Fighter 1076, Street Fighter 1077, Street Fighter 1078, Street Fighter 1079, Street Fighter 1076, Street Fighter 1077, Street Fighter 1078, Street Fighter 1079, Street Fighter 1080, Street Fighter 1081, Street Fighter 1082, Street Fighter 1083, Street Fighter 1084, Street Fighter 1085, Street Fighter 1086, Street Fighter 1087, Street Fighter 1088, Street Fighter 1089, Street Fighter 1090, Street Fighter 1091, Street Fighter 1092, Street Fighter 1093, Street Fighter 1094, Street Fighter 1095, Street Fighter 1096, Street Fighter 1097, Street Fighter 1098, Street Fighter 1099, Street Fighter 1100, Street Fighter 1101, Street Fighter 1102, Street Fighter 1103, Street Fighter 111, Street Fighter 1104, Street Fighter 1105, Street Fighter 1106, Street Fighter 1107, Street Fighter 1108, Street Fighter 1109, Street Fighter 1110, Street Fighter 1111, Street Fighter 1112, Street Fighter 1113, Street Fighter 1114, Street Fighter 1115, Street Fighter 1116, Street Fighter 1117, Street Fighter 1118, Street Fighter 1119, Street Fighter 1120, Street Fighter 1121, Street Fighter 1122, Street Fighter 1123, Street Fighter 1124, Street Fighter 1125, Street Fighter 1126, Street Fighter 1127, Street Fighter 1128, Street Fighter 1129, Street Fighter 1130, Street Fighter 1131, Street Fighter 1132, Street Fighter 1133, Street Fighter 1134, Street Fighter 1135, Street Fighter 1136, Street Fighter 1137, Street Fighter 1138, Street Fighter 1139, Street Fighter 1140, Street Fighter 1141, Street Fighter 1142, Street Fighter 1143, Street Fighter 1144, Street Fighter 1145, Street Fighter 1146, Street Fighter 1147, Street Fighter 1148, Street Fighter 1149, Street Fighter 1150, Street Fighter 1151, Street Fighter 1152, Street Fighter 1153, Street Fighter 1154, Street Fighter 1155, Street Fighter 1156, Street Fighter 1157, Street Fighter 1158, Street Fighter 1159, Street Fighter 1156, Street Fighter 1157, Street Fighter 1158, Street Fighter 1159, Street Fighter 1160, Street Fighter 1161, Street Fighter 1162, Street Fighter 1163, Street Fighter 1164, Street Fighter 1165, Street Fighter 1166, Street Fighter 1167, Street Fighter 1168, Street Fighter 1169, Street Fighter 1170, Street Fighter 1171, Street Fighter 1172, Street Fighter 1173, Street Fighter 1174, Street Fighter 1175, Street Fighter 1176, Street Fighter 1177, Street Fighter 1178, Street Fighter 1179, Street Fighter 1180, Street Fighter 1181, Street Fighter 1182, Street Fighter 1183, Street Fighter 1184, Street Fighter 1185, Street Fighter 1186, Street Fighter 1187, Street Fighter 1188, Street Fighter 1189, Street Fighter 1190, Street Fighter 1191, Street Fighter 1192, Street Fighter 1193, Street Fighter 1194, Street Fighter 1195, Street Fighter 1196, Street Fighter 1197, Street Fighter 1198, Street Fighter 1199, Street Fighter 1200, Street Fighter 1201, Street Fighter 1202, Street Fighter 1203, Street Fighter 1204, Street Fighter 1205, Street Fighter 1206, Street Fighter 1207, Street Fighter 1208, Street Fighter 1209, Street Fighter 1210, Street Fighter 1211, Street Fighter 1212, Street Fighter 1213, Street Fighter 1214, Street Fighter 1215, Street Fighter 1216, Street Fighter 1217, Street Fighter 1218, Street Fighter 1219, Street Fighter 1220, Street Fighter 1221, Street Fighter 1222, Street Fighter 1223, Street Fighter 1224, Street Fighter 1225, Street Fighter 1226, Street Fighter 1227, Street Fighter 1228, Street Fighter 1229, Street Fighter 1230, Street Fighter 1231, Street Fighter 1232, Street Fighter 1233, Street Fighter 1234, Street Fighter 1235, Street Fighter 1236, Street Fighter 1237, Street Fighter 1238, Street Fighter 1239, Street Fighter 1240, Street Fighter 1241, Street Fighter 1242, Street Fighter 1243, Street Fighter 1244, Street Fighter 1245, Street Fighter 1246, Street Fighter 1247, Street Fighter 1248, Street Fighter 1249, Street Fighter 1250, Street Fighter 1251, Street Fighter 1252, Street Fighter 1253, Street Fighter 1254, Street Fighter 1255, Street Fighter 1256, Street Fighter 1257, Street Fighter 1258, Street Fighter 512, Street Fighter 1259, Street Fighter 1260, Street Fighter 1261, Street Fighter 1262, Street Fighter 1263, Street Fighter 1264, Street Fighter 1265, Street Fighter 1266, Street Fighter 1267, Street Fighter 1268, Street Fighter 1269, Street Fighter 1270, Street Fighter 1271, Street Fighter 1272, Street Fighter 1273, Street Fighter 1274, Street Fighter 1275, Street Fighter 1276, Street Fighter 1277, Street Fighter 1278, Street Fighter 1279, Street Fighter 1280, Street Fighter 1281, Street Fighter 1282, Street Fighter 1283, Street Fighter 1284, Street Fighter 1285, Street Fighter 1286, Street Fighter 1287, Street Fighter 1288, Street Fighter 1289, Street Fighter 1290, Street Fighter 1291, Street Fighter 1292, Street Fighter 1293, Street Fighter 1294, Street Fighter 1295, Street Fighter 1296, Street Fighter 1297, Street Fighter 1298, Street Fighter 1299, Street Fighter 1300, Street Fighter 1301, Street Fighter 1302, Street Fighter 1303, Street Fighter 1304, Street Fighter 1305, Street Fighter 1306, Street Fighter 1307, Street Fighter 1308, Street Fighter 1309, Street Fighter 1310, Street Fighter 1311, Street Fighter 1312, Street Fighter 1313, Street Fighter 1314, Street Fighter 1315, Street Fighter 13-16, Street Fighter 13-17, Street Fighter 13-18, Street Fighter 13-19, Street Fighter 13-20, Street Fighter 13-21, Street Fighter 13-22, Street Fighter 13-23, Street Fighter 13-24, Street Fighter 13-25, Street Fighter 13-26, Street Fighter 13-27, Street Fighter 13-28, Street Fighter 13-29, Street Fighter 13-30, Street Fighter 13-31, Street Fighter 13-32, Street Fighter 13-33, Street Fighter 13-34, Street Fighter 13-35, Street Fighter 13-36, Street Fighter 13-37, Street Fighter 13-38, Street Fighter 13-39, Street Fighter 13-40, Street Fighter 13-41, Street Fighter 13-42, Street Fighter 13-43, Street Fighter 13-44, Street Fighter 13-45, Street Fighter 13-46, Street Fighter 13-47, Street Fighter 13-48, Street Fighter 13-49, Street Fighter 13-50, Street Fighter 13-51, Street Fighter 13-52, Street Fighter 13-53, Street Fighter 13-54, Street Fighter 13-55, Street Fighter 13-56, Street Fighter 13-57, Street Fighter 13-58, Street Fighter 13-59, Street Fighter 13-60, Street Fighter 13-61, Street Fighter 13-62, Street Fighter 13-63, Street Fighter 13-64, Street Fighter 13-65, Street Fighter 13-66, Street Fighter 13-67, Street Fighter 13-68, Street Fighter 13-69, Street Fighter 13-70, Street Fighter 13-71, Street Fighter 13-72, Street Fighter 13-73, Street Fighter 13-74, Street Fighter 13-75, Street Fighter 13-76, Street Fighter 13-77, Street Fighter 13-78, Street Fighter 13-79, Street Fighter 13-80, Street Fighter 13-81, Street Fighter 13-82, Street Fighter 13-83, Street Fighter 13-84, Street Fighter 13-85, Street Fighter 13-86, Street Fighter 13-87, Street Fighter 13-88, Street Fighter 13-89, Street Fighter 13-90, Street Fighter 1391, Street Fighter 1392, Street Fighter 1393, Street Fighter 1394, Street Fighter 1395, Street Fighter 1396, Street Fighter 1397, Street Fighter 1398, Street Fighter 1399, Street Fighter 1400. Street Fighter 1401, Street Fighter 1402, Street Fighter 1403, Street Fighter 1404, Street Fighter 1405, Street Fighter 1406, Street Fighter 1407, Street Fighter 1408, Street Fighter 1409, Street Fighter 1410, Street Fighter 1411, Street Fighter 1412, Street Fighter 1413, Street Fighter 1414, Street Fighter 1415, Street Fighter 1416, Street Fighter 1417, Street Fighter 1418, Street Fighter 1419, Street Fighter 1420, Street Fighter 1421, Street Fighter 1422, Street Fighter 1423, Street Fighter 1424, Street Fighter 1425, Street Fighter 1426, Street Fighter 1427, Street Fighter 1428, Street Fighter 1429, Street Fighter 1430, Street Fighter 1431, Street Fighter 1432, Street Fighter 1433, Street Fighter 1434, Street Fighter 1435, Street Fighter 1436, Street Fighter 1437, Street Fighter 1438, Street Fighter 1439, Street Fighter 1440, Street Fighter 1441, Street Fighter 1442, Street Fighter 1443, Street Fighter 1444, Street Fighter 1445, Street Fighter 1446, Street Fighter 1447, Street Fighter 1448, Street Fighter 1449, Street Fighter 1450, Street Fighter 1451, Street Fighter 1452, Street Fighter 1453, Street Fighter 1454, Street Fighter 1455, Street Fighter 1456, Street Fighter 1457, Street Fighter 1458, Street Fighter 1459, Street Fighter 1460, Street Fighter 1461, Street Fighter 1462, Street Fighter 1463, Street Fighter 1464, Street Fighter 1465, Street Fighter 1466, Street Fighter 1467, Street Fighter 1468, Street Fighter 1469, Street Fighter 1470, Street Fighter 1471, Street Fighter 1472, Street Fighter 1473, Street Fighter 1474, Street Fighter 1475, Street Fighter 1476, Street Fighter 1477, Street Fighter 1478, Street Fighter 1479, Street Fighter 1480, Street Fighter 1481, Street Fighter 1482, Street Fighter 1483, Street Fighter 1484, Street Fighter 1485, Street Fighter 14 Street Fighter 1486, Street Fighter 1487, Street Fighter 1488, Street Fighter 1489, Street Fighter 1490, Street Fighter 1491, Street Fighter 1492, Street Fighter 1493, Street Fighter 1494, Street Fighter 1495, Street Fighter 1496, Street Fighter 1497, Street Fighter 1498, Street Fighter 1499, Street Fighter 1500. Street Fighter 1501, Street Fighter 1502, Street Fighter 1503, Street Fighter 1504, Street Fighter 1505, Street Fighter 1506, Street Fighter 1507, Street Fighter 1508, Street Fighter 1509, Street Fighter 1510, Street Fighter 1511, Street Fighter 1512. Street Fighter 1513, Street Fighter 1514, Street Fighter 1515, Street Fighter 1516, Street Fighter 1517, Street Fighter 1518, Street Fighter 1519, Street Fighter 1520, Street Fighter 1521, Street Fighter 1522, Street Fighter 1523, Street Fighter 1524, Street Fighter 1525, Street Fighter 1526, Street Fighter 1527, Street Fighter 1528, Street Fighter 1529, Street Fighter 1530, Street Fighter 1531, Street Fighter 1532, Street Fighter 1533, Street Fighter 1534, Street Fighter 1535, Street Fighter 1536, Street Fighter 1537, Street Fighter 1538, Street Fighter 1539, Street Fighter 1540, Street Fighter 1541, Street Fighter 1542, Street Fighter 1543, Street Fighter 1544, Street Fighter 1545, Street Fighter 1546, Street Fighter 1547, Street Fighter 1548, Street Fighter 1549, Street Fighter 1550, Street Fighter 1551, Street Fighter 1552, Street Fighter 1553, Street Fighter 1554, Street Fighter 1555, Street Fighter 1556, Street Fighter 1557, Street Fighter 1558, Street Fighter 1559, Street Fighter 1560, Street Fighter 1561, Street Fighter 1562, Street Fighter 1563, Street Fighter 1564, Street Fighter 1565, Street Fighter 1556, Street Fighter 1557, Street Fighter 1558, Street Fighter 1559, Street Fighter 1560, Street Fighter 1561, Street Fighter 1562, Street Fighter 1563, Street Fighter 1564, Street Fighter 1565, Street Fighter 1566, Street Fighter 1567, Street Fighter 1568, Street Fighter 1569, Street Fighter 1570, Street Fighter 1571, Street Fighter 1572, Street Fighter 1573, Street Fighter 1574, Street Fighter 1575, Street Fighter 1576, Street Fighter 1577, Street Fighter 1578, Street Fighter 1579, Street Fighter 1580. Street Fighter 1581, Street Fighter 1582, Street Fighter 1583, Street Fighter 1584, Street Fighter 1585, Street Fighter 1586, Street Fighter 1587, Street Fighter 1588, Street Fighter 1589, Street Fighter 1590, Street Fighter 1591, Street Fighter 1592, Street Fighter 1593, Street Fighter 1594, Street Fighter 1595, Street Fighter 1596, Street Fighter 1597, Street Fighter 1598, Street Fighter 1599, Street Fighter 1600. Street Fighter 1601, Street Fighter 1602, Street Fighter 1603, Street Fighter 1604, Street Fighter 1605, Street Fighter 1606, Street Fighter 1607, Street Fighter 1608, Street Fighter 1609, Street Fighter 1610, Street Fighter 1611, Street Fighter 1612, Street Fighter 1613, Street Fighter 1614, Street Fighter 1615, Street Fighter 1616, Street Fighter 1617, Street Fighter 1618, Street Fighter 1619, Street Fighter 1620, Street Fighter 1621, Street Fighter 1622, Street Fighter 1623, Street Fighter 1624, Street Fighter 1625, Street Fighter 1626, Street Fighter 1627, Street Fighter 1628, Street Fighter 1629, Street Fighter 1630, Street Fighter 1631, Street Fighter 1632, Street Fighter 1633, Street Fighter 1634, Street Fighter 1632, Street Fighter 1633, Street Fighter 34, Street Fighter 1635, Street Fighter 1636, Street Fighter 1637, Street Fighter 1638, Street Fighter 1639, Street Fighter 1640, Street Fighter 1641, Street Fighter 1642, Street Fighter 1643, Street Fighter 1644, Street Fighter 1645, Street Fighter 1646, Street Fighter 1647, Street Fighter 1648, Street Fighter 1649, Street Fighter 1650, Street Fighter 1651, Street Fighter 1652, Street Fighter 1653, Street Fighter 1654, Street Fighter 1655, Street Fighter 1656, Street Fighter 1657, Street Fighter 1658, Street Fighter 1659, Street Fighter 1660. Street Fighter 1661, Street Fighter 1662, Street Fighter 1663, Street Fighter 1664, Street Fighter 1665, Street Fighter 1666, Street Fighter 1667, Street Fighter 1668, Street Fighter 1669, Street Fighter 1670, Street Fighter 1671, Street Fighter 1672, Street Fighter 1673, Street Fighter 1674, Street Fighter 1675, Street Fighter 1676, Street Fighter 1678, Street Fighter 1679, Street Fighter 1680, Street Fighter 1681, Street Fighter 1682, Street Fighter 1683, Street Fighter 1684, Street Fighter 1685, Street Fighter 1686, Street Fighter 1687, Street Fighter 1688, Street Fighter 1689, Street Fighter 1690, Street Fighter 1691, Street Fighter 1692, Street Fighter 1693, Street Fighter 1694, Street Fighter 1695, Street Fighter 1696, Street Fighter 1697, Street Fighter 1698, Street Fighter 1699, Street Fighter 1700. Street Fighter 1701, Street Fighter 1702, Street Fighter 1703, Street Fighter 1704, Street Fighter 1705, Street Fighter 1706, Street Fighter 1707, Street Fighter 1708, Street Fighter 1709, Street Fighter 1710, Street Fighter 1711, Street Fighter 1712. Street Fighter 1713, Street Fighter 1714, Street Fighter 1715, Street Fighter 1716, Street Fighter 1718, Street Fighter 1719, Street Fighter 1720, Street Fighter 1721, Street Fighter 1722, Street Fighter 1723, Street Fighter 1724, Street Fighter 1725, Street Fighter 1726, Street Fighter 1727, Street Fighter 1728, Street Fighter 1729, Street Fighter 1730, Street Fighter 1731, Street Fighter 1732, Street Fighter 1733, Street Fighter 1734, Street Fighter 1735, Street Fighter 1736, Street Fighter 1737, Street Fighter 1738, Street Fighter 1739, Street Fighter 1740, Street Fighter 1741, Street Fighter 1742, Street Fighter 1743, Street Fighter 1744, Street Fighter 1745, Street Fighter 1746, Street Fighter 1747, Street Fighter 1748, Street Fighter 1749, Street Fighter 1750, Street Fighter 1751, Street Fighter 1752, Street Fighter 1753, Street Fighter 1754, Street Fighter 1755, Street Fighter 1756, Street Fighter 1757, Street Fighter 1758, Street Fighter 1759, Street Fighter 1760, Street Fighter 1761, Street Fighter 1762, Street Fighter 1763, Street Fighter 1764, Street Fighter 1765, Street Fighter 1766, Street Fighter 1767, Street Fighter 1768, Street Fighter 1769, Street Fighter 1770, Street Fighter 1771, Street Fighter 1772, Street Fighter 1773, Street Fighter 1774, Street Fighter 1775, Street Fighter 1776, Street Fighter 1777, Street Fighter 1778, Street Fighter 1779, Street Fighter 1770, Street Fighter 1780, Street Fighter 1781, Street Fighter 1782, Street Fighter 1783, Street Fighter 17 84, Street Fighter 1785, Street Fighter 1786, Street Fighter 1787, Street Fighter 1788, Street Fighter 1789, Street Fighter 1790, Street Fighter 1791, Street Fighter 1792, Street Fighter 1793, Street Fighter 1794, Street Fighter 1795, Street Fighter 1796, Street Fighter 1797, Street Fighter 1798, Street Fighter 1799, Street Fighter 1800. Street Fighter 1801, Street Fighter 1802, Street Fighter 1803, Street Fighter 1804, Street Fighter 1805, Street Fighter 1806, Street Fighter 1807, Street Fighter 1808, Street Fighter 1809, Street Fighter 1810, Street Fighter 1810, Street Fighter 1810, Street Fighter 1811, Street Fighter 1812, Street Fighter 1813, Street Fighter 1814, Street Fighter 1850, Street Fighter 1816, Street Fighter 1817, Street Fighter 1819, Street Fighter 1820, Street Fighter 1821, Street Fighter 1822, Street Fighter 1823, Street Fighter 1824, Street Fighter 1825, Street Fighter 1826, Street Fighter 1827, Street Fighter 1828, Street Fighter 1829, Street Fighter 1830, Street Fighter 1831, Street Fighter 1832, Street Fighter 1833, Street Fighter 1834, Street Fighter 1835, Street Fighter 1836, Street Fighter 1837, Street Fighter 1838, Street Fighter 1839, Street Fighter 1840, Street Fighter 1841, Street Fighter 1842, Street Fighter 1843, Street Fighter 1844, Street Fighter 1845, Street Fighter 1846, Street Fighter 1847, Street Fighter 1848, Street Fighter 1849, Street Fighter 1850, Street Fighter 1851, Street Fighter 1852, Street Fighter 1853, Street Fighter 1854, Street Fighter 1855, Street Fighter 1856, Street Fighter 1857, Street Fighter 1858, Street Fighter 1859, Street Fighter 1860, Street Fighter 1861, Street Fighter 1862, Street Fighter 1863, Street Fighter 1864, Street Fighter 1865, Street Fighter 1866, Street Fighter 1867, Street Fighter 1868, Street Fighter 1869, Street Fighter 1870, Street Fighter 1871, Street Fighter 1872, Street Fighter 1873, Street Fighter 1874, Street Fighter 1875, Street Fighter 1876, Street Fighter 1877, Street Fighter 1878, Street Fighter 1879, Street Fighter 1880, Street Fighter 1881, Street Fighter 1882, Street Fighter 1883, Street Fighter 1884, Street Fighter 1885, Street Fighter 1886, Street Fighter 1887, Street Fighter 1888, Street Fighter 1889, Street Fighter 1890, Street Fighter 1891, Street Fighter 1892, Street Fighter 1893, Street Fighter 1894, Street Fighter 1895, Street Fighter 1896, Street Fighter 1897, Street Fighter 1898, Street Fighter 1899, Street Fighter 1900, Street Fighter 1901, Street Fighter 1902, Street Fighter 1903, Street Fighter 1904, Street Fighter 1905, Street Fighter 1906, Street Fighter 1907, Street Fighter 1908, Street Fighter 1909, Street Fighter 1910, Street Fighter 1911, Street Fighter 1912, Street Fighter 1913, Street Fighter 1914, Street Fighter 1915, Street Fighter 1916, Street Fighter 1917. What about Street Fighter 1918, Street Fighter 1919, Street Fighter 1920, Street Fighter 1921, Street Fighter 1922, Street Fighter 1923, Street Fighter 1924, Street Fighter 1925, Street Fighter 1926, Street Fighter 1927, Street Fighter 1928, Street Fighter 1929, Street Fighter 1930, Street Fighter 1931, Street Fighter 1932, Street Fighter 1933, Street Fighter 1934, Street Fighter 1935, Street Fighter 1936, Street Fighter 1937, Street Fighter 1938, Street Fighter 1939, Street Fighter 1940, Street Fighter 1941, Street Fighter 1942, Street Fighter 1943, Street Fighter 1945, Street Fighter 1944. Street Fighter 1945, Street Fighter 1946, Street Fighter 1947, Street Fighter 1948, Street Fighter 1949, Street Fighter 1950, Street Fighter 1951, Street Fighter 1952, Street Fighter 1953, Street Fighter 1954, Street Fighter 1955, Street Fighter 1956, Street Fighter 1957, Street Fighter 1958, Street Fighter 1959, Street Fighter 1960, Street Fighter 1961, Street Fighter 1962, Street Fighter 1963, Street Fighter 1964, Street Fighter 1965, Street Fighter 1965, 1966, Street Fighter 1967, Street Fighter 1968, Street Fighter 1969, Street Fighter 1970, Street Fighter 1971, Street Fighter 1972, Street Fighter 1973, Street Fighter 1974, Street Fighter 1975, Street Fighter 1976, Street Fighter 1977, Street Fighter 1978, Street Fighter 1979, Street Fighter 1980, Street Fighter 1981, Street Fighter 1982, Street Fighter 1983, Street Fighter 1984, Street Fighter 1985, Street Fighter 1986, Street Fighter 1987, Street Fighter 1988, Street Fighter 1989, Street Fighter 1990, Street Fighter 1991, Street Fighter 1992, Street Fighter 1993, Street Fighter 1994, Street Fighter 1995, Street Fighter 1996, Street Fighter 1997, Street Fighter 1998, Street Fighter 1999, Street Fighter 2000, Street Fighter 2001, Street Fighter 2002, Street Fighter 2003, Street Fighter 2004, Street Fighter 2005, Street Fighter 2006, Street Fighter 2007, Street Fighter 2008, Street Fighter 2009. I don't know.